Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about The Final Empire, the first book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. So since I've already done a regular book review for this book, this is going to be more of a discussion. I want to talk a little bit about the book from a meta level, and I'm going to keep it fairly spoiler free. There might be a couple little tiny things, but I'm going to keep it relatively spoiler free. But I also want to touch on the idea of an adaptation for this book. So yes. So with that being said, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, The Final Empire, I think, is one of Brandon Sanderson's most clean books ever. And this entire trilogy is also incredibly clean and very straightforward, in my opinion. This series is very well done. It is paced very nicely. But this first book is like a masterclass of how to use archetypes and tropes in a different way, in a new way. So Brandon basically takes the classic My Fair Lady story, kind of a rags to riches situation, or take someone from a peasant situation, put them in a aristocratic situation, and allow them to adapt and learn and stuff like that. So like that's the My Fair Lady trope. And he also basically took the basic tenets of a heist story and mixed that in there together. And then for just good measure, he threw in the teacher and mentor scenario in there as well. So he's used these very common tropes and almost cliche tropes and archetypes in such a way that feels new and refreshing and just completely clean and unencumbered by influence, which is something that I've noticed happens to Brandon later. So, through the use of these tropes, Brandon was able to create some really compelling and interesting characters with very clear motivations and very easy to understand because, like I said, most of them are really general archetypes, but they have a lot of unique things about them that makes them feel fresh and new and not just a retread of this type of character. Like a very popular fantasy, or not even fantasy, a very popular book, or not even book, Jesus, a very popular movie series that is based on heists is Fast and Furious. So if you go back and look at some of the earlier Fast and Furious movies before they become just action spectacle movies or whatever, when they are still classic heist movies, you can kind of see some parallels in the way Brandon constructs his team in The Final Empire and the way that the team is constructed in those movies. So it very clearly has a lot of heist effects with this umbrella of the My Fair Lady thing. So using these things, you would think it would feel a little repetitive, a little, done before and a little, passe or whatever, but as I said, Brandon has found a way to basically make these characters feel new, fresh, and original, and very easy to understand, and made them all very likable. Some like less likable than others, but in ways that you completely understand. So you understand like everyone's perspective. So it's just really cleanly done, and it's really well done. And I think this has to have been written at a time when Brandon was less into the fan community. Like I love the fact that Brandon is so close to all his fans. That's one of my favorite things about him as a writer. Like he's very hands-on. He speaks to all of us and stuff, and he actually listens to us and like takes influence from the things we say and like our interpretation of his work. And to me, I very clearly can see that in some of his more recent stuff. But I think while that's a benefit and an amazing thing on his end, I think it's also like a slippery slope and a very dangerous thing because the way he seems to be influenced is in such a way that affects his writing. And for me personally, I fear that that corrupts his original vision. So the first Empire or the final Empire, the first Mistborn era, feels very clean and like uninfluenced to me. It feels like I can't pick and choose. I can't see his influences as clearly as I can in other stuff. So that's partially why the Final Empire and the first era of Mistborn holds such a specific and special place in my heart. Is because it feels completely unencumbered by influence. There is no like let's make this closer to a real life parallel because that's how I interpreted it kind of thing. There's not really any of that. And while Brandon being close to his fans is really awesome, I just, like I said, I do think that that is something that's a slippery slope that can really corrupt his vision for his stories. So I've reiterated and repeated myself multiple times about how I think this series is very clean and concise and very easy to understand, which is why I think it would be a great first adaptation of Brandon's work. It would be, I think it will work in such a way that it could get all demographics into it and it would like explode this interest in fantasy because the story is so familiar, it is so relatable and it is so very easily understood, but it is epic and it is deep and it is kind of complicated in some ways, and the magic is very interesting and very unique. So I think those kind of things will like really latch on to a lot of people, like big audiences and stuff, while not confusing them or leaving them completely in the lurch or whatever. With the like, 'cause say you did something like Stormlight first, which has a very steep learning curve, I feel like you would get most major audiences to check out of that immediately, versus Mistborn, which couches itself in this very huge heist kind of scenario where I think most people could really easily jump onto that story. So Brandon has mentioned previously that this is the year Hollywood came calling, and I really hope they came calling about a Mistborn movie trilogy, because I think the first three books and the first, well, the three books and the first era of Mistborn would make a great movie trilogy. And if not a movie trilogy, then you could take era one and era two, put them kind of together, and make it a long form TV show. You know, just like after season three or something like that, do the time skip and then be in era two. Like, so I think that would be really interesting. So I'm really hoping that that is what Hollywood came calling to Brandon about this year. I really hope we do get a Mistborn adaptation. And considering Brandon has also mentioned previously that he's been working on scripts for Mistborn, like he's taken some of the scenes that exist in the book and readapted them in such a way to make them cleaner. So like he will take a training scene and a action scene and kind of mix it together to accomplish both things at the same time to make it more visually dynamic and more movie like. So that kind of stuff I really like. I'm interested to see the type of changes Brandon would make in order to adapt it to the screen, as opposed to some, you know, veteran Hollywood person who just wants to couch some other generic story inside of a fantasy thing and then just kind of erode the realness of what Brandon created. So this video has been a little rambly, a little scatterbrained, but the primary purpose of it, apart from to reiterate the awesomeness of Mistborn Era One and to kind of talk about it and get us ready for the Lost Metal, I want to ask you all, what do you think about a movie adaptation of Mistborn? Do you think, like, who do you think should do it? What studio do you think, like right now? Don't say Disney, just for the love, just don't say Disney. But like, what studio do you think could actually handle it, and in what ways do you think it would be adapted best? So, general takeaways from this video is definitely Mistborn Era 1, The Final Empire, is a great start to a great trilogy and a great fantasy series by a great writer. And I think it will make a great TV show or movie or pretty much any kind of media adaptation like that. But I'm really curious to know what you all think about it. Let me know in the comments down below, what type of adaptation do you think will work best for Mistborn, and how would you go about it? Let me know some of the ideas that you think would fit this kind of story well. So, as always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.